if I lose a lash? Oh, man. Okay. Are we okay, Coral? All right. Yeah. Hello, 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 and welcome back to With Love and Butter, a chef's podcast on dating and relationships and all the food and drinks that get us through it. I'm your host, Courtnee Futch, chef, baker, mixologist, culinary producer, cookbook author, current corporate marketing baddie who is in transition out of that and back into entrepreneurship. And most relevant to the podcast is a former serial monogamist turned roster dater in the new year. And then, you know what I mean? And she's not doing that anymore. Yet again. And I wouldn't say serially monogamous, but I would, right? And that's the tea. That's why we're gathered here today. This is episode 13, our last one of the season before I take a hiatus, a brief one, and resume the podcast in the summer. And today we were originally, when I first started writing this podcast episode, I want to be clear, this was 2 months ago, okay? This has been a 2-month long podcast episode in the making, but we were going to be talking about my new outlook on dating as I went into my 3rd year of singleness, what I wanted, how I planned on getting it, and how it was going just a couple of months in. But baby, let me tell you what, life has been lifing in the most funny way possible, and I am in a relationship now. So instead, we are going to talk about how an unexpected someone made me live my entire life more romantically and creatively. A letter that I wrote to myself at the top of January, and one going even further back than that to 2021, and how returning home to Atlanta changed my life for the better. It's a lot to get into. Now, before we get started, I want y'all to know that just because this is the last episode of season 1 doesn't mean I'm leaving y'all high and dry, okay? I want y'all to know that I have also launched a With Love and Butter weekly email newsletter. And this choice is a really exciting one for me because it's an opportunity for me to live a little bit more life without the pressure of creating such a massive piece of content on a bi-weekly basis. You know what I mean? I'm going to let more love and good food and strong drinks continue to find me while I am in the process of becoming. And I think y'all know because y'all literally be in my DMs like, girl, where is the podcast? Like, don't they stop? And I completely understand. I get it. But I'm sure, and maybe you've noticed and also maybe you haven't, right? I don't expect that anybody's paying that much attention to the ongoings of my life. But the podcast has become so much more spaced out over the course of time. What used to be a bi-weekly deliverable, right, a bi-weekly schedule just doesn't have the capacity for that because so much more life is happening, which means I need to feel it, which means in turn that I later need to think about it, to write about it, to be able to bring it here, right? And so podcast episodes that used to be a lot more fun and a lot more lively and talking about, you know what I mean, old flings of the past, I can't hold the space for that anymore because life has just been really requiring me to spend more time creating. And that hasn't always looked like this space, okay? And I think that that's because I'm evolving into somebody who just needs more time to breathe in between my thoughts. Doing the work of thinking is hard. And feeling while thinking has gotten even harder to do somehow as I balance every hat that sits atop my head. I mean, I listed like 6 of them at the top of this pod, right? So I've decided to lean into one more word this year, and that word is fragility. I am a fragile, growing, feeling, returning, loving thing. And I want a place to put my thoughts where they can just be and where they can bloom. So in my newsletter, I'll be unpacking big thoughts kind of like this in much smaller ways, digestible bites, if you will. Thoughts about myself, about friendship, about romance, thoughts on creativity and balance, on comfort, on home, musings on food, on intimacy, on heaviness too. Expect to see a softer, less polished, and hopefully funnier side of me. One more full of poetry and streams of consciousness and words of the day, and also visual inspiration. And you can subscribe to my newsletter With Love and Butter at courtneefutch.substack.com. It's also linked in the description. Now that we've handled our business, let's go ahead and move on, baby. This is going to be a long episode. I want to tell you right now, y'all know that I script these, like I write them because my ADHD would really work to kind of counteract all this progress that I've made to try to tell you one linear story. Generally, my podcast episodes, even the longest of them, is between 8 to 10 pages. This one is 17. Which means we might be here for like 3 hours. I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not a threat. But this is a really good road trip sort of pod if you're really just, you know what I mean, in the headspace for that. Or feel free to break it up and take it in chunks, baby. I don't know. You know what I mean? We could do an ASMR moment and I could just whisper it to you while you sleep and you could just absorb the podcast via osmosis. It really doesn't matter to me. However, I'm the one who has to edit this, and so I'm going to try to keep this baby a little bit more condensed. We're going to do our level best, but babes, there is a lot to say. So let's go ahead and get a crack-a-lack, and we're going to move into the What's Shaking segment of the podcast. Yeah, okay. So now let's get into what's shaking. Yeah. Last one of the season, but certainly not Courtney's last cocktail. So we have a really nostalgic and I think emotionally charged episode ahead of us today. And I feel like I wanted to make a drink that sat with me in two spaces. One in Charlotte at my favorite little bar called Idlewild. I love it so much. I spend so much time there, me and my homegirls. It's become a place that I think I've come to see myself as a regular at. And someone had said on TikTok not too long ago, and I wish I could remember who it was, that being a regular somewhere feels like a luxury. And I think it is, right? And so it really speaks to the step that I've made to make Charlotte feel like home. And then surprisingly, shortly thereafter, I was in Atlanta and found a drink that feels so similar with someone who now also feels like home to me. And so today's cocktail pairing is a play on one of my favorites from that speakeasy here in Charlotte, but also it's a callback to my favorite drink on the menu at a place in Atlanta called Bar Margot, where my man and I had our very first date. Y'all, I'm finna my man, you know what I mean? I'll keep it cute. Anyway, the drink has mezcal, bourbon, ginger, lemon, a little splash of apple cider, which was not an inclusion in either of the first two drinks, and a little bit of crushed pink peppercorn. The mezcal bourbon combo is severely slept on, and you know what I mean? I need everybody to just catch that mustard. But the smoke and the woodsiness of both of the spirits makes for a really well-balanced beverage, and the lemon and the ginger kind of cut right through that and make it a really refreshing drink. So, without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's get into the beverage. Let's get into the tea. Let's get into the drinks. Let's get into let's feed ourselves. You know what I mean? And the spirit of it all. Anyway, babies, cheers, y'all, to the end of the season and to the start of a new one. I love you guys. She's strong now. I can't do too much at once. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our mise en place, right? And that's me in place, which is essentially just me giving you context about how we even arrived here. And especially for the huge leap I feel like there has been from like stark singleness to being in a relationship. I'm sure you're all wondering, Courtney, how the hell did we get here? Well, this is where we'll talk about the how. So this episode is, I think, really interesting because it's about the past, the present, and the future, right? And so I need to let y'all in on some of the hopes that I have had for myself over the last several months, and also what's kind of been going on in my mind. As it turns out, I'm trying to become a lot of things, all in the same woman at the same time. I'm building a profitable personal brand and agency after years, y'all, of being trained in on my professional career as a marketing leader at food startups, both big and small. Deciding to close that door as an employee feels absolutely insane. Like, I feel like I am just blowing up my universe at every single turn, by the way. And I think that's something that we will continue to explore in full in the aftermath of that transition. But I'm also passionate about being a loving and doting daughter, a supportive, fun, and inspired friend. And now, as a fully realized lover girl and a one-day wife, I'm really just hopeful that there will continue to be space for me to grow in that union and eventually become a loving, doting mother to children who feel empowered to say the quiet parts out loud. And because so much has been going on in my universe over the last several months, I took pen to paper to sort through my thoughts, reflections on the last 10 years of my life and the ways that I've been loved and also unloved in my romantic relationships. From a deeply sobered place, I took a step back to make a move forward. So, in January 2023, I wrote a letter to January 2024 Courtney. It reads as follows. Courtney, when you're reading this letter, I hope that you're looking back on yourself with kinder eyes, kinder language, a bit more graciousness for yourself. I hope that this is the year that teaches you the difference between survival and joy. The year that gives you discipline and systems and the capacity to create life-changing work. This is the year that you tell life-changing stories. 2022 gave you the gift of movement and quiet and a sense of home. And it was jarring as hell, and it was also so fun. And you made friends that will be in your life forever. You laughed until you peed a little. You stacked the deck with romantic community care. You will never be lonely again. That's the work you did for yourself. For little you. Oh. You said the quiet parts out loud over and over again, and it brought your people right to you. You did a lot of brave things. Oof. Courtney, you gotta get it together. You need to record this episode. Bitch, if I lose a lash. Oh man. Okay. Are we okay, Coral? All right. Yeah. You did a lot of brave things after years and years of hiding. Hiding behind yourself, hiding behind your ego, hiding behind others, and you decided to step out of the shadows and into the work. So, 2023 is the year that you reap. 2023 is the year that you give to yourself what you have so freely been giving to everyone else. Attention, care, discipline, nourishment. By the time you read this letter, you will have found your way back to yourself. You are in community. You are wealthier, healthier, smarter. You've traveled to at least 4 more countries this year. You took your cabin trip twice. You planned a Lover Girls retreat. You used your platform to connect to Black women who are also on their way back to themselves, too. You are a storyteller and are being paid handsomely to do so. The orals love it here. You create content full-time, and resting was built into your creative process. So even when you are busy, you are never stressed because you've got help. And so, because of this, by the time you read this letter, your partner will have found his way to you, too. He is a direct reflection of the way that you've poured into yourself. He leads your relationship with loving and compassion and creative vision, with want and devotion and intention, and he is a soft place to land. Your person has made his way to you, and with him, you found new ways to love. A love that inspires your creative work. Love that makes you feel safe and seen and witnessed without weariness. The sort of love that makes you want to nurture in all the ways that you know how to right now, and more that you will later learn for a family with him. A love that brings you back to food and keeps you there, because it is the thing that you have always, always had. A love that might bloom into a family business. A love that meets you in your depth. The depth that you worked so damn hard not to drown in. This was the year that you poured yourself into your relationship with God and began speaking to him out loud again. This was the year that you had the harder conversations with your dad and found your peace there. Forgiveness, too. This was the year that you were finally able to do the things you've always dreamed of for your mom. This was the year that you only said no because you wanted to, not because you didn't have it, not due to lack of time. This was the year that you also saved your money. This is the year that you prioritized true enjoyment in your hobbies and your crafts and in your creativity. This was the year that you learned something new every single day. Courtney, this was the year that you did your becoming. You became. We became. Here's to looking back, but not ever going there. I love you so much. You took great care of us. Ooh, baby. And let me tell you what, it's hard as hell to read that now, right? The thing about the writing of this letter is that it required such deep introspection about what had already been taking place in my world. And there are so many spaces in which I've been trying to grow and have been figuring it out, and maybe not always doing what I thought I would be doing. But particularly as it comes back to my romantic relationships, there were 3 things I felt like I really needed to figure out as it pertained to dating, right? There were things that I know I was getting wrong. And then there were things that I thought I might be getting right. and none of them had a place to land, really. None of my thoughts felt concrete, and I just kind of needed to put them down somewhere. And so, you know what I mean? I went into what felt like a series of creation sessions with myself to figure out what I need love to look like for me to know that that's what it is when it comes to me. And what ended up coming up, there were three pillars that I felt like were really important, and I'll share them with y'all. So, one, what boundaries and guidelines do I need to have in place to ensure that in dating I'm consistently feeling good and can also create space for other people to feel good in my world, right? And then, in addition to that, what sort of partnership do I want to be in, right? Um, it was not enough to just say, this is the sort of man that I want to be with. I'll share that list too. You know I do have one. Come on now, baby. You know I do. Courtney loves a list, right? But it was more about, how do I want this partnership to make me feel? What goals do I have in partnership? I should be writing those down and then backtracking into what sort of man is going to have the attributes that allow us to have that sort of partnership together. And it was the first time I'd sort of done that framing, right? I'd always focused in on what they need to have and not what I want with them. And the shift for me feels like a huge one. And then the last piece is, well, who do I need to be in order to be in that sort of partnership? What do I need to go and get for myself so that I can ensure that when I am presented with the opportunity of deep, lasting partnership, then my ducks are as best in a row as they can be? And so I took pen to paper the way that I do. You know what I mean? What little attributes, what character traits, what fun little quirks do I want to have? Do I want to see in order for a partnership to sort of achieve that? And so first, let's dive into what is now the past tense list of rules for how I approach dating at the top of the year, right? Now, you know what I mean? Courtney was making a lot of TikToks at the beginning of January about like, listen, baby, it's feeling like wife season. I don't know what's going on, but it's giving very much wife. It's giving wife. You know what I mean? And I don't know where that confidence sort of came from, but I felt like I really needed to reestablish what my boundaries were, what my list of rules for the approach to dating was going to be in order to keep myself just like level and also a little bit more no nonsense this year. I feel like y'all have listened to the damn podcast. You know what I was up against. I was fighting demons. Them demons were not mine. I'm gonna leave it there. Rule number one. Okay. Rule number one. Do not share so much of your time. Craving connection is completely normal, but hours on the phone, body doubling with someone, are not a replacement for intentional time spent connecting. Now, I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit. I feel like I am absolutely the type of person who values talking, right? I really do. However, just sitting on the phone, not talking about anything while sharing each other's space is not my idea of building connection. And so even though it feels nice, what we're actually doing is kind of like fostering a false sense of deeper connection by just being in proximity to one another, particularly over the phone. Baby, if we're going to do nothing together, let's do that nothing in person. You know what I mean? I do need to spend intentional time connecting with someone. I get off my phone if you just want to sit here and listen to me breathe, baby. It's not that type of hotline. It's just not. It's not. Rule number two. Only entertain an attraction. Do not try to force its growth on you. Mind you, these rules are me to me saying this because there were some frogs along the way. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna leave it there to keep things kind. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna elaborate too much further than that. But just only entertain the attraction. Just you need to be attracted to this person. That is it. You know what I mean? But baby, please just be attracted to them. You will suffer under the tutelage of a lack of attraction to a partner. And people say that that's vain. I don't think so. I think I want to like looking at your face. That's what I think. I want to like looking at it so that I can persist. But I will not be persistent under dubious conditions. I won't be I'm so sorry. You know what I mean? I need to be attracted to my man. I don't even care if y'all think my man is attractive. I don't give a damn about any of that. But I need to think my man is very attractive. So I will only be entertaining that, and was only entertaining that. And that just is what it is, okay? Rule number 3. Use your voice to share what you do and don't like. And I'm saying this particularly for the women out there, especially sexually, okay? There is always room for you to be both gracious and grateful, but you have a voice, get what you need with it. I'm going to leave that there. That feels very just like a nice little soundbite, okay? Number 4, and this one is huge for me as somebody who you've heard me talk about my relationship to my body confidence, body positivity, body neutrality, etc., etc. But rule number 4 is do not disparage yourself or your body in front of men, let alone anyone, but particularly as you're dating men, do not make comments about your body that are not praiseful. Okay? You are beautiful and wondrous, and you contain sunlight. You are trying so hard to see yourself all the time. Please let others participate in the kind seeing of you. That's it, that's all. Okay. Number 5 is challenge their worship of you. Make them earn the right to worship you and all of its privileges. Make them earn it with their kindness, with their leadership, with their thoughtfulness, and with intention. Okay? I hope that just lands on whoever it needs to land on. Number 6 is appreciate attraction without assigning meaning. Desire is not an investment. Intention is investment. Somebody can desire you all day long and not be willing to do a damn thing about it. Not be willing to make manifest the way that desire registers for them in their emotions, okay? And not have a willingness. There's a stinginess of spirit at times, you know what I mean? Just an all-around lack of generosity, or just a true lack of actioning against their interest. Don't align yourself with that. To be desired feels like a really beautiful thing, but it is not everything. It is not meant to be all-consuming. Intention is investment. Act accordingly. 7, if they say, and you know what? No. Listen to me. If they say they do not deserve your care, let them be right. Let them be right. You will not ever win a battle that they've already decided you were meant to lose. Their inability to let themselves be loved by you is not a you problem to solve. Send that baby to therapy and keep it the fuck pushing. Okay? 8. And this one felt really important for me, right? This felt really important for me as a rule because I find myself to be an incredibly giving, deeply invested, and involved sort of person. I know this about me. I'm a little intense, you know what I mean? And so when I'm showing up in dating spaces, when I'm showing up in platonic spaces, when I'm showing up in family spaces, the way that I embed myself so deeply into the ongoings of everything, I found that I need to be a little bit more exacting with my boundaries. And here is the rule that I've applied to myself. There is no amount of selflessness that you can give to somebody that would prefer you to be as selfish as they are. If the way that they move through the world is selfishly, don't surprise them with your selflessness, okay? You're not going to be able to change their relationship to the self by giving them more of yourself. Don't do it. Don't do it. That's it. And then there's the question of what sort of partnership do I want to be in? And I got really granular here, like really, really specific. And I wrote down, I think like 25 bullet points. I'm not sharing all that with y'all. You know what I mean? Courtney's prayer can be, you know what I mean? Sold, not told. Okay, but I'll share my 8 just to keep this thing brief. 1, I want a partnership that will lift me off the ground but not put me on a pedestal. A love that acknowledges its own humanity and is a soft place for 2 lovers to land and unite under our calling. 2, a loving and honest thinking partnership. And by thinking partnership, I mean like a thought partner or like a creative partner. I have always wanted somebody to think with, right? So a thinking partnership that holds space for thought, even when it's aimless and nonsensical. A resting place for the mundane and for the tedious, as well as for play and for whimsy. 3. A mutual and collaborative structure that allows for individual flow, whether creatively, energetically, or financially. Now, I'll give y'all a little bit of insight into this one. I have always, I felt like, attracted a slightly more serious man, right? And I think part of that is because I live in flow. And so I've always been, I think, very attracted to the idea of partnering with someone who had more structure in their life, whether that was in their routine, whether that was in their work, whether that was in just like the way that they kind of think about the world, maybe from a more analytical perspective, as opposed to like my more creative and intuitive one. I wanted to kind of have that sturdiness and stability to lean up against so that my flow can do what the flowing does, because my flow produces. And so being in a space where I'm able to do that, but then also I'm able to put systems in place that allow for my partner to flow in and out of the things that they enjoy doing as well. So when I say like mutual and collaborative, it means that the flows are going to ebb. It's going to ebb and flow. But the flows are going to transition, I imagine, over the course of a relationship as people change. There might be a creative era in my future partner's life, or, you know, not current partner, but you know what I mean. And as such, I want to be able to hold space for that. So by both allowing myself to rest on the structure of my partner, but by also creating systems of structure in my own life that will later allow them to flow, or give them space to flow right now, I think is really just my most ideal sort of partnership, even from like a more tactical sort of working perspective. Then there's number 4. So the sort of partnership that I want to be in, as I identified earlier this year, is a place of both quiet and loud assurance and then reassurance. And as a team, we are each other's biggest hype people, and eventually come to raise children who hear more yeses and whys than no's. And I feel like this is really important to say because I have a lot of thoughts about child rearing, and I would like to be more of a yes and a why sort of parent, as in yes and, or here's why we should be shifting and thinking about this a little differently. And I'd like to do that infinitely more than just hearing flat out no. That's really it. And so I think that in a relationship where two people have committed to the yes and the why more than there are no's, and there's that space for both assurance and then reassurance and context there, when you're kind of building that into the process, it feels like the sort of thing that is very easy to pass down to children so that they can do their own emotional regulation as well. But I think that relationships do require a degree of interdependence, in which it's okay to be vulnerable and to say, I could use a little bit of assurance from you, or I could use a little bit of reassurance from you. And I'd like to go ahead and like build that early. I feel like I thrive in spaces where assurance and reassurance kind of come naturally. But I also understand that not everybody's in the space to build that, right? And so then it's just a matter of being, I think, really effortful and intentional in the building of those two things. 5. The sort of partnership I want to be in is a space for continued self-maintenance and improvement propelled by grace and kindness as opposed to fear. And the thing that always kind of comes up for me with this is like weight, I feel like, is always a conversation. And we've talked before about just kind of my relationship to my own body and the ways that it has either been kindly or unkindly, and mostly unkindly, brought to my attention that something may have changed, right? And I think that because of that, I'm especially sensitive to it. And I intend to be especially sensitive to it with everybody that's around me. And so having that sort of in mind at most times does allow for those conversations to be had around self-maintenance and improvement in a more gracious and more like kind and human forward sort of way than one that is fueled by the idea or fear of rejection. That's really what it is, right? And that feels deeply personal for me, but I feel like it was important to share and was also very important for me to be able to pinpoint just for my own healing journey. 6. I desired the sort of partnership that had social stamina. And by that I mean there was a consistent effort to do the work of community building wherever there is bandwidth to do so. So, a truly communal relationship with the people that we love most, who are also participating in and leading in the mutual feeding of us back, right? So, something that feels really reciprocal, really being in community. It does take a village, not just to raise a child, but to nurture love as well. And I want to be a hub for that, but I also want to be on the receiving end of that. I don't know how to be a hub and a spoke at the same time, but ultimately that's what I'm looking for, is mutuality in community, and that relationship being a place where that can thrive and my partner sees the value in it as well. I desired a partnership in which we are two people who are serious about our shit but do not take ourselves so seriously, okay? I am a big fan of enjoyment, and as such, having the space to explore our relationships to joy, both together and individually. I don't need to be the arbiter of all your joy. That's a lot of pressure on me. You know what I mean? It's a lot of pressure for me. I want to encourage my partner to find other things that make them feel joyful, that make them feel happy, that spark creativity, that bring them a sense of comfort and belonging in the world outside of this relationship as well. And so those are things that we might be able to do together at times. But I feel like continuing to encourage individual self-actualization is really, really key. Which brings me to my next point in number 8, okay? Which is that I desire a partnership that sees love as an exercise in freedom, an avenue of self-actualization, but not a shackling, okay? The way that I cringe when I hear people talk about their partner like a tedious obligation. You know what I mean? When women refer to their husbands as one of their children, it makes me deeply sad. You know, when men refer to their wives as, you know what I mean, like the old ball and chain, da da da, and you don't even want to go home. What the hell is going on over there? You know what I mean? Please just do a conscious uncoupling and both of you go sit down somewhere. You know, it is cringy to hear, and I think cringy is not even the word. I think it's disheartening and a little disillusioning to hear people think of love as a loss of freedom. The entire way that I have come to see love, not even the ways that I've experienced it, so I'm going to be real with y'all. The way that I have come to see love, I'm so grateful that I have seen it as a motivator. I'm so grateful that I have seen it as a space for exploration. I am so grateful that I have seen it as, a gateway, really, when it's healthy. And I think that is what I want to participate in. If anybody else will call me the old, you know what I mean, the ball and the chain and the whatever, if there was ever unloving language, you know what I mean, obligated, clunky, saddening language around the existence of me and our mutual commitment to each other, I would literally just keel over and die. You know what I mean? I mean, it would just wreck me. I would just simply cease to exist. I would just perish off the face of the planet. Nothing makes me more sad than the idea that in public spaces, my man is like not, you know what I mean? It doesn't always even need to be excitement and out and out enthusiasm, but is like resentful. Ugh. And you're telling people, bro, I can't. I need a sip. This is ridiculous. How dare you? I'll stop. Okay, so let's move on because I'm just upset at myself now. All right. But I know y'all also want to know what sort of attributes in a man I think might help build the sort of partnership I had talked about before. And so here are 16 things. Now, I know we went from like 8, and then bam, Courtney, now we're at 16. Girl, what is going on? The maths are not mathing. Well, I figured y'all would want more traits. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to help. You know what I mean? But here were the things that I was looking for going into this dating season. And I'll do my best to run through this quite quickly because I feel like what's understood does not need to be explained here. 1, someone who is thoughtful and pays attention to detail. 2, a man who values language and wants to love me with words of affirmation. 3, A man who understands the value of verbal communication and prefers it. Now, that's really important for me. Everybody's love language is going to look a little bit different, but I am a verbal gerbil. You know what I mean? I meant girl, but verbal gerbil's kind of, doesn't like gerbil. Anyway, 4, can articulate complex things empathetically. 5, is kind to everyone and still a little bit of a cheeky smartass. That's my favorite type of person. 6, intentional and self-directed. 7, enterprising and a creative problem solver. 8, industrious. Okay, industrious. 9, a balanced ambivert, can both be the life of the party and play a supporting role when need be. 10, values their time and also processes that automate. 11, a strong sense of humor because laughter is, as we all know, so crucial. 12, a little things person for whom no gesture is too small. 13, assertive but not aggressive. 14, and I want to just put every underline that I can under this, sensible and sweet. Sensible and sweet, okay? And 15, says my name often. I love that. I just love it. 16 is a man with a strong ability to dream beyond the now. Something that I've been able to determine looking back over my life and also imagining a future for myself is to know that for me, to fall in love with a man whose dreaming muscle is being well trained is to be seen my most clearly. In order to see me my most clearly, I need you to be able to dream. And so then you're probably wondering, well, Courtney, who do you need to be in order to enjoy this sort of partnership? Again, this list is very exhaustive. I think I ended up with something like 40 or so. But I'll share the 16 with you. Again, y'all, you have to be specific when you're really getting into the tea of like who you are and what you want, because the more specific you get, the more language it gives you to start to target those things. I feel like it's been easier for me to digest who I'm trying to become because I sat down and I got really specific and super, super granular with myself so that I could be FFR, right? So, number 1. In order to enjoy this sort of partnership, I am a woman who can let herself be loved by others, allowing space for an abundance of intimate platonic connection by saying yes to helping and also by asking for help. 2, someone who is disconnecting from professional expectations. The flexibility of the work will continue to be valuable to me as I move into whatever career is next. But love exists in the very fabric of my business plan, and I am able to execute on that from anywhere. This has actually been, it's been more of like a mission/vision statement for myself as I've been doing like this rebrand and a shift. And I feel like that's really important to note. Love exists in the fabric of my business plan. I'll harp on that a little bit more later as we kind of talk through like what that career transition actually looks like, which is not this episode at all. But I feel like it's just really key to note. So I am someone who has that flexibility because the business plan is built around love. All right. 3, I am a warm hug personified. Some days more fireplace, other days a little forced fire, but only when needed. 4, soft, silly, fragile, effortful, thoughtful. 5, a mirror for the big feelings. A mirror for the big feelings, that's it. 6, maintains the value of time spent alone and also time spent in community. It's very easy to get lost when you enter a new partnership, when you're in a partnership, when you really love your partner. It is very easy to get lost in the spending of time with just them, but then you're not being fed from other places, right? And so being really intentional about continuing to be fed in that way is something that I think is incredibly important for me. And is a huge part of the fabric of the building of this community and all of the other communities that I've kind of created in real life and online. 7, a softer place to rest my thoughts about my body and to do the work of loving her and how she has helped me survive for so long. 8, I am industrious, scrappy, practical, and still a girl who loves aesthetics. 9, a woman with a strong sense of celebration who knows when to reflect on the accomplishments, big or small, of my people. 10, an earnest student. 11, vulnerable and unafraid of conflict. which is huge for me. I've been quite conflict avoidant in my past, and I'm doing a lot of work to try to make myself feel more comfortable with it and more confident in it. And it's going to take some time, but ultimately, the woman who I really want to be is unafraid of conflict, and conflict doesn't have to be a negative thing, but there needs to be a place to confront the uncomfortable, and I have to hone that skill. 12. Being more of a big things person, which requires more foresight for planning. I'm definitely more of a small things person because I'm able to hold myself accountable to the deliverability of small things, right? And big things, when trying to execute them for someone else, just feels like such a daunting task because the way that my brain is set up, I really struggle with the organizing of all of the things and then rolling them out consistently over a long period of time. It just, shout outs to ADHD. Okay. 13 is acknowledging that hiding isn't serving anyone, but especially not me. And so I need to be doing less of that hiding. 14 is being a woman who nurtures desire for myself. Now, this is a big one for me, and if I start talking about it for too long, I will cry. So I'm not going to do that. I'll spare us all the tears, and this lash glue I don't think can persist for too much further. But nurturing desire for myself has really been a process over the years, not just in relationship to my body as a vehicle for desire, but also for my mind as part of the desire, for my heart as part of the desire, to want myself so deeply that other people's desire for me does not shake my relationship for desire for myself. And I think that is maybe 2 more years worth of work to do in therapy, if I'm being completely honest. I think that desire is something that we start to recognize early, either in lack or in abundance or somewhere idling around neutral. And mine has existed in a lot more lack for the foundational years of me discovering this thing about myself. And so it really became like a key need. And instead of asking my partner to do the work of being the only person in the world to desire me, I feel like it's significantly more important for me to do the work of making sure that my relationship with my desire for myself is so strong that even on the days that they do not, I am not moved by that so deeply. Okay. 15 is I am a woman who is beginning, I haven't always been like this, but I am a woman who is beginning to ask more questions and as such feels less pressure to have answers. And 16, a person who executes. I am a person who executes, even at the risk of looking silly. And I love these things about me. Something that you might notice is that the things that I have shared, right, these 2 lists about who I think my person is in order to sustain the sort of partnership that I'd like to have in my, like, you know what I mean, like in my penultimate actualization of love, and who I am / need to become in order to exist and contribute to that sort of partnership. Those things, those 2 lists of 16 traits that I just gave y'all, although they're a lot more exhaustive than that, but I gave y'all 16, they're not directly tied to each other, right? A lot of who I think I need to be is quite specific. And I think that's because becoming is quite specific work. And it extends even outside of the partnership into how I want to move through the world. The things that I hope equip me for the sort of partnership that I desire above. But it's a lot harder to be specific about who a person is and the way that they move through the world and their intentionality as they move through specific instances. I could not even begin to think through what exactly that looked like, but I felt very comfortable in thinking through, one, the partnership piece of like, how does this partnership make us both feel? How do we move within the space, the safety and security and ease of that partnership, even when things are challenging? And then determining what sort of traits and quirks and, you know what I mean, and characterisms are going to fit into that in a partner so that I can identify them when I see them. And then who do I need to be? And I can get really specific with me because I know me, right? I think that just makes sense. So you don't want to get so specific in my thinking. I don't think that you want to get so specific when you are thinking about like who that partner is, that you're like down in the instances of it all. I don't think that you need to be creating examples for all of those things, but I do think that there is something about identifying the core trait, because it'll have permutations. It'll look a little bit differently in everybody, but at the core of those traits were some things that I felt like were really unshakable for me, and I'm glad that I did the work of identifying them. So now let's get into the main courts. All right, this is really where the juiciness of this whole thing kind of is. You know what I mean? So we're going to take a little rewind, and we're going to go to late last year, because getting to the space that's been able to identify all the things that we just talked about took a lot of work. Okay, required a lot of work, demanded the work actually. And so y'all might remember that I recorded episode 10 of the podcast. We're on episode 13 now, but episode 10 of the podcast was the day that I was flying down to Austin, Texas for Afrotech, which is the largest Black tech conference in America. It's produced by Blavity and Morgan DeBon. It's a really great conference. Highly recommend going if you're even tech adjacent. I do recommend going, okay? And two very interesting things happened at Afrotech last year. And here's number one. So one, I'm running around Afrotech last year, and you know, I'm at this event, and I'm there with my team, and we're just running around, and we're doing all of the things. And while I'm there, a listener of the podcast comes up to me, and she was like, "Oh my God, hey girl, like I listened to the pod," and she was so kind and really cool, and I really enjoyed chatting with her. And it was really exciting to kind of see my work having been absorbed by someone and then appreciated by them in real time right in front of my face. And it ended up being a really humbling experience in a few ways, because in that conversation with the young lady who had just finished watching the last episode before coming out to Texas, I ended up asking her about her thoughts on the most recent one, and she shared with me something that really just, I don't know, like, I'll just tell y'all what she said. She shared with me that she was wondering when I would start to take some damn accountability. And she was relieved to see the pivot happen around my birthday episode. And I literally think I said to her, huh? And she was like, yeah, you know, I was waiting to see it. I was worried about you, girl. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest with y'all, because that really low-key pissed me off. And not for the reasons that you immediately think. And it wasn't about her and her saying of it. But I'm sure that y'all know about me now, that a lot of people sometimes make off-the-cuff comments to me like that. And I'm never usually taken aback in the moment. It's not usually about the moment that they say the thing. But those things do sit with me for like months and months and months at a time. And even now I can tell you that that's true, because I'm still thinking about it. And that was literally in November. So she's made this comment, and she's like, girl, I'm so glad to see you, girl, because I was wondering when you were going to start to take some damn accountability. And I remember thinking, excuse me, you don't really know me like that. And then I remembered that that was the fucking point. The point was that she didn't know me like that. The point is that I produce this podcast, but I make a point not to connect every dot. The point is, you know what I tell you, and you don't know what I don't tell you. And so for somebody to see the accountability, it makes a lot of sense that you would start to see it when I finally shift the subject matter, because episode 8 was my birthday episode, and this subject matter had shifted from a space of reflecting back on past dating situations and whatnot to bringing you into the now. 2021 Courtney, who was going through those dating experiences, baby, she's a different girl. She's a different girl. So anyway, here's the thing. I never promised to be a girl upon arrival. I never promised to have arrived. I've never agreed to being a destination. I have never promised a destination to quite literally anyone. I look quite lovingly and sometimes longingly, and sometimes I shouldn't at all, back on my past, because memory is the gift that I give back to myself. And so the thing that I think might not be as clear, because I didn't have the language for it at the beginning of producing this podcast, is that I never intended to connect every dot. I never intended to tell every part of every story. I also never intended to be giving advice, because as you can see from the 12 episodes prior, baby, I had a lot of growing up to do, and I was getting it wrong. And it was fun anyway, right? I was getting it wrong and was still managing to find the fun in it, find the romance in it, to find the lesson in it, to find the sense of play in it, to find my sense of self in it. There were things, even though I was fucking it up and getting fucked up, right? There were the instances in which I'd been in Space is pouring love into unloving cups. I never said I was here to give advice. I'm just telling you where I went wrong so that you might not. Right? And so, yeah, I was kind of offended when she said that to me. Like, we know each other for real, that I was waiting on you to grow up. But she and I were both right at the same damn time because some growing up had to happen. And some accountability did have to happen. And also, the discomfort of telling those parts of those stories so early on has kept it from looking like the work was happening even when it was. So I had to come out of hiding. And that's really the tea. I had to come out of hiding. So hey, you know what I mean? And then here's the other thing that happened at Afrotech. I met B, and it's very much big B, not the little one. You know what I mean? Quite a capital B, right? And the B here feels like being, feels like to be loved, feels like to be cared for, cherished. To be feels like a choice to live remarkably. So, here's the full story, you guys. Here's how I got into my relationship. Oh, brother. All right. So, all right. Okay. I need a sip. The perception of it all. Okay. So, here's how I met B, which is what we're calling my boyfriend. The B is not for boyfriend. The B just is. The B just is. And you know what I mean? And that's it. The B stands for my business. And do. However, here's how we met. So I, upon going to Afrotech, had started making a bunch of content about like, listen, I don't know what it's gonna be, but I know my husband's at the Afrotech. You know what I mean? I know my baby's down at 8C, and I don't know when we're gonna meet or whatever. And I've been saying this in my TikTok lives. I'd made a couple of videos talking about once I'd gotten down there, just how beautiful everybody is at Afrotech. I mean, the absolute. It makes me emotional right now even to like recall and recount the beauty of being in a space surrounded by contemporaries and mentors and people that you want to learn from, and people who have built multi-million-dollar businesses, and people who are getting their first job in tech, and the entry-level babies, and you know what I mean, and the cybersecurity folks. It was so cool to be there. And the thing that brought me out there is that I'm a marketer for a tech startup, right? And so I'm tech adjacent, right? I don't live in the technology, but I promote the technology. I market the damn technology, you know? And so to be there just really felt so transformational for so many levels. But the thing that was really funny is I'm looking around. I'm a very single girly, you know what I mean? And I'm perceiving so much. And I'm like, my God, what a beautiful consortium of Negroes. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? I'm like, damn, everybody in here looks so good. The moisture in here, the scent. You know what I mean? There's not an ashy elbow amongst us. Not an ashy elbow was seen. And I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of taking all of this in. And there is this overwhelming sort of like, I don't know, but it's giving the husband somewhere in here. Okay? You know what I mean? Hey now. And so when I started making content that shifted a little bit more toward that, I was very determined to do a couple of things. One, I moved my Hinge profile down to Austin, Texas 2 weeks prior. I was not playing, okay? I know I'm going to be here for a week. That's thing number one. Thing number two is, and I recommend that everybody do this if you're getting ready to go to a conference, is in the evenings where you have free time, book some reservations for restaurants that you really want to try out and do it for two. One, because at least that way you'll always have a table so you can go and at least sit by yourself even if it just ends up being you. That's thing number one. Two, if you meet somebody, you can always ask them to come and join you. And that's true for friends. That's true for, you know what I mean, colleagues that you see around the way. You don't ever have to worry about where you're going to eat. Do a little bit of digging, do a little bit of planning, and you know what I mean, and just do that. And I feel like that's maybe one of the better pieces of advice that I have for setting up lighter social spaces for yourself in the middle of a jam-packed event, especially if you're looking to create like more intimate connections with folks. I ended up grabbing dinner with a couple of my followers, who I hate the word followers, but that's what I ended up doing. I had a couple of dates, while I was out there. And funny enough, B was not amongst them. And let me tell you how we got here. So, baby girl, she's minding her black-owned business as I'm walking through the conference floor. It's like the second to last day, or it's the last day of the conference floor being open. And so I'm walking around with my really good friend Ron, and Ron and I both happen to be looking like teachers at Slytherin. You know what I mean? We've got on like this green sort of like vest sort of situation with a really cool like cream. We gave couple now. We did do that. And people were like, oh my god, imagine that's so cute. And I was like, oh, that is cute. But like that wasn't what that was. And Ron and I have been friends since the Syracuse days. And so it was just really funny. Like we're running around the conference floor and we're very much matching. And while we're walking the conference floor, one of his friends comes up with one of his female friends. And this friend here is B. And so B comes up and, and I was like, oh, hey, whatever, like, nice to meet you. There's a quick little exchange. Ron is telling me how, him and B did a program together some years back, and that's how they know one another. I was saying that, well, Ron and I went to Syracuse together, that's how we know each other, and whatever. And I'm talking to the girl who's also standing there. I'm not going to give her name because y'all are really detectives, and I don't have time, you know what I mean? So we're all standing there. We're having this conversation as a foursome. It's like a really cool, light convo, though. And I'm like, cool, bet. I do notice, in retrospect, that there was a very long, lingering look that was given by him to me. So what felt like a group conversation kind of got real silent at one point when I just kind of noticed him, like, staring. And it made me wonder if I had something like in my teeth, or, you know what I mean? Like, I was just like, damn, like, have I been running around looking crazy and y'all was just gonna let me rock? Because that's not very African-American of you. You know what I mean? It's not giving unity. If y'all just let me run around and I got, you know what I mean, this morning's spinach breakfast sandwich, wedged in between a canine and an incisor, or whatever the two teeth are that are close right here. I don't know. But the way that he looked at me was such a long look that I was like, something must be on my face. And so I looked back at him and was kind of like expectantly waiting for him to say something, and hit him with one of my signature looks, which I did not have a cocktail at the time. But if I had done, you've seen me do the eye contact thing, y'all. I'm not even gonna recreate the moment. However, at the end of that, he reminded me later that I hit him with a squint. It was like a I'm seeing you see me, what's going on type of vibe, right? Now, the thing that is really funny about all of this is that we all depart, we go our separate ways, and I did end up asking Ron about him a little bit later, but Ron didn't really give me too much in the way of information, and we were just catching up over dinner. It was like, again, it was a very light sort of thing, and so I didn't think too much of it. I go on about my business, the conference is over, but something very interesting had happened the day prior. Now, the day prior to the meeting on the conference floor, again, I keep getting banned on TikTok. It's because I do be talking about what they say I be talking about, which is something ignorant, I'm sure. You know what I mean? And I was a little lit the night prior, so I think I might have actually said something that was bordering on the inappropriate. It's likely. I don't worry about it too much. However, I'd gotten banned from being able to do TikTok lives, and was suffering in silence, right? And so I started bringing my videos directly to feed about what it was that was going on at Afrotech. A couple of those videos ended up getting picked up by the Afrotech team, which they reposted on their social and things like that. But one of the videos that I made, which is the Denzel Washington sound, I'm leaving here with something. You know what I mean? I'm from around the way. I'm leaving with something. I had dubbed that over, and I was like, it's me seeing all these beautiful, eligible black men at Afrotech, right? And so I was like, I'm from around the way. I'm leaving with something. I got a drink in my hand. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm leaving with something. You know what I mean? And so I just decided that, like, it was just going to be, like, it was a joking sort of thing, but, like, I'm not playing too much. Baby girl's manifesting. So, I post that video. It starts, whatever. It takes off a little bit and then kind of idles out because Afrotech is obviously quite niche in the TikTok space, right? Like, it's still relatively new as a concept for some folks. And so... a girlfriend of his, like a female friend of his, who I love, whose name I also will not give y'all because again y'all be investigating. Um, like comments underneath the post and is like, oh yeah, I have a friend who's at Afrotech. You should meet him. And I was like, oh yeah. So I was like, well, girl, okay. So I shoot her a DM, just being like, hey, girl, because I don't think we were mutuals on TikTok at the time. So she sends me a message and she's like, hey, like, here's the guy, great guy, definitely your type, etc., etc. I was like, okay. Well, actually, I didn't even see the message that day. So she and I were in communication the day that, I think that morning, and then I'm on the conference floor that day. The next day, when I opened her DM, I find out that the person she was talking about was B. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy, girl. I just met him out on the floor. And she was like, oh, that's so cool, da da da. Now, I'm realizing now that, of course, she knew that. But anyway, so there was kind of like this, I don't want to call it a conspiracy, but it felt like the universe and friends and whatnot were just kind of like conspiring into the meeting of this moment. And, when I look back on that, I think about how special it is that, like, people who we love and know were facilitating this connection, right? I think that that's something that's really special. I think I really value that sort of like high level of context for someone when I'm moving into like a potential dating space with them. So like that introduction piece, I felt like was really, really important. It was quite foundational to the story because I'm not sure how it would have shaped up in a different space. But anyway, fast forward. I go out into the dating world, it again, post Afrotech, everybody got sick, BT dubs, because it was just freezing in Austin. And nobody was prepared for that sort of weather. So, months go by now and work is keeping me busy and I'm running around on the digital and the internet streets and in real life streets. And I'm back and forth to Atlanta and have been going back to Atlanta pretty much once a month, every month since October of last year. And Atlanta's where I'm from. So it was very interesting to kind of be doing a homecoming, but returning for work. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really cool. Like I'm coming back here for this, but I'm getting to reconnect with great friends and whatnot. And I was just loving it. I found that I was developing new friendships in a lot of unexpected ways. It was really just beautiful and empowering and gave me a sense of comfort and home. And I really loved that. And so while I'm kind of moving through the world and, the way that Courtney tends to do, which is, care freely, but also a little strategic. And I went ahead of this trip, this upcoming trip in, early winter months. I went ahead and dropped that little pin down to Atlanta for a trip I knew I had upcoming. I'm glad I did that because I'm on there swiping for like a couple days. I was like, okay, whatever. Thinking about lining some dates up, had started to line some dates up. And then, run across this man who I know I had seen before, but it took me a second to place it. And then the moment that I did, I was like, oh shit, B, hey, hi, what's up? And I shot him a note and I was like, hey, like it's me, Courtney from Afrotech. I'm Ron's friend. Great to meet you. And he was like, no, I absolutely remember who you are. Or I was like, oh, like it was something to the effect of like, essentially like, do you remember me? And he was like, no, I remember. I was finna pull up on Ron in New York next week and ask him about you. And I was like, period. So we started talking that day. I was heading down to Atlanta like the following day, or no, 2 days later. And so we ended up getting together and having our first date like that Sunday. We ended up having our first date that Sunday. And after our first date, I ended up writing a poem about this interaction because it ended up being a 4-hour date. Now, you know what I mean? Courtney's like I'm a good dater. I feel like I'm a really good, like I'm a very enjoyable person, like on dates. And so there has to be like a high level of awkwardness for me to just like struggle in a dating space. But that was an exceptional first date. Like that was an exceptional first date. And the date is so good, in fact, that when it was over, reluctantly, I ended up needing to write about it. Because there was an interaction that happened in the space of our time together that felt like I was able to close a very particular sort of open loop, like a loop that had been open for such a long time in my creativity And being able to bring that kind of like full circle on the date felt really insane. And it's actually a metaphor about oil painting. And it turned into this like missive about failure in romance. So I'll read it to y'all because I need you to subscribe to my damn newsletter. But I'm going to share this one with you because I think you'll see it in the newsie. But I just feel like putting words to it's really important. It is the first Sunday of February, and I am early to the Four Seasons, Atlanta. What a perfect place for a date, I thought to myself as I valet my truck and walk up the stairs toward Bar Margot. The sun is setting behind me, and I wished I could stop to take a selfie without looking pretentious. I take a quick glance at my reflection before proceeding to the host stand. I was glad that I'd buttered my legs for the occasion. All this thigh I've got, but barely show, is lightly covered by the hem of a navy blue and white cable knit sweater dress. The W embroidered onto the left shoulder resembles the remnants of an Ivy League ex-lover's closet, the kind of keepsake they miss in the breakup but are too proud to go retrieve. My calf-length pointed toe boots are a chocolate crocodile texture. I feel polished but playful, like new money with old money friends. I am sitting in a cloud of ambered vanilla perfume and checking my phone in a low seat in the hall, near the host, legs crossed so that they might be seen and appreciated, but only as a nod. From my periphery, I see a man walk past the host stand and down the hall toward me, toward the bathroom. He is not the someone I am waiting for, but I smile in his direction anyway, as a courtesy. He is just past my feet when he stops dramatically and turns around. It's the sort of move I'm sure he thought was cute or interesting. He trains his eyes on me, still seated, and says, I just had to let you know how beautiful you look. What's your name? You single? Thank you. I'm Courtney, and I'm not. In fact, there's my guy. I move past the gentleman toward my date and hug him as he lands on the last stair. The two exchange a brief, light string of words, some sort of easing of tension and assurance of no intended disrespect. I smile and pretend not to notice the exchange as he and I walk to the stand to get seated. I also note to myself that I already want to hold his hand. For it to be a first date, I feel strangely at ease with this man. Our banter is breezy and light and rich from the moment that we sit down, both tucked into the same side of the U-shaped dark leather booth. Laughter bubbles up between us like LaCroix, like hints of flavor, like static, like sparkling. Our first round of drinks has been placed on the table when we cheers to something new. We trade cocktails for tasting, and I wish I'd ordered what he had when I note how he is watching me curiously. I do not even remember what we are talking about, and yet I am retaining every detail and asking questions back. We are making decisions about meals and telling stories when the real inquiries start. So, how's dating going for you? He returns the question to me. A soft smile parts my lips as I recall an old hobby. I am about to take the long way around. You ever tried oil painting? I ask, pulling the dewy coupe glass of mezcal and lemon from the wood on the table and up to my lips. Glossed so that he could see his reflection in them? Maybe. He gently shakes his head no and is curiously raising a brow. I catch my breath before speaking. I used to paint when I was younger. I had an eye for color, for lines, for texture. Not really a steady hand, but I did have the hours to correct, to sharpen lines, to blend and to contour, to shape a vision. I used acrylics for paint. It's all I really knew was out there at the time. Colored pencils and acrylic paint and canvas, and soon I'd have a tangible something like art. And late last year, I decided I wanted to create again, and so I picked up oil painting, and I am bad at it. The color theory feels new. The brushes feel stiff. The paint won't thin out so easily. I learned that I need a medium for blending. And I can correct mistakes with another coat of paint, but now it takes days to dry, not hours. And I watch people make beautiful things with their oil paints, and I wonder how long they got it wrong before right. They look so happy, so vibrant, so colorful. And making art with a new medium is so much harder than I thought it would be. I'm questing to create something beautiful, but the paint isn't drying. It slinks off the canvas and onto me and into my hair and into the cuffs of my sleeves. I'm covered in slippery, oily colors, vibrant streaks that won't wash off. I'm making art everywhere by accident. Everywhere but the damn canvas. And it makes me wonder if I am the only art here. Damn. Yeah. And we both let the sheer absurdity of this analogy sit between us. His face is frowned into an amused question mark, and I can feel the follow-up questions coming, but I cannot contain my laughter now. What started as a small chuckle grew into shoulder-shaking, hot-eared laughter, and I wondered quietly if I would have to explain to this man that I'm not drunk, but I don't know what good it would do. I laugh until I realize how unfunny it is, actually, to want to share your art and not have anyone care to see it up close, or to see it and stay. And when the tears began pooling at the corners of my eyes but did not drop, I hoped he didn't think this was an unhealed heartbreak resurfacing. It wasn't. I'm just tired and sensitive and wanting and an optimist. And with my left hand, I am dabbing away tears, trying to explain that I don't generally cry on dinner dates unprompted, that I'm a sane person, I promise, and poetry just got the better of me again. I'm trying to reel my crazy back in for this man who I'm so certain I've terrified. My left hand is waving away pity and lightly blotting my eyes and gesturing that I'm okay, just real fragile these days. And the left of me is so busy explaining away the things that I love most about myself that I do not realize he is holding my right. We depart from that date after 4 hours, only leaving each other because he has a 6 a.m. flight to New York for work. And I promised my girls that I'd meet them at this bonfire. And I could have stayed in that moment, I think, for several more hours, if not for prior obligations. So I let it be okay that I was signing up to like this man who was back and forth between New York and Atlanta, even though New York felt like a whole lifetime ago for me, who had moved to Charlotte after 7 years of working in the city to slow my life down, to slow everything the hell down. And so in the month between our first date and my next trip to Atlanta, I am falling for this man over FaceTime calls and voice notes and matched energy and random Starbucks money and long talks about absolutely nothing and also absolutely everything and also a future. For a man who's so tangible now, at the time, he made a lot more sense to me in my favorite medium, which is ink, and pen-touched paper for so many more journal entries, but in the last of them, before I went flinging myself into the thicket of Atlantan feelings, I say this. I am seeing a man whose laugh sounds like biting into ripe peaches in the late summer months. Sounds like a sunny day, like kids running through sprinklers, like wraparound porches, like loving, like coming home after years. It is bright and surprisingly juicy. He is sweet like his laugh. Sometimes it makes me throw my head back in laughter too and share in the joy with him. Other times, makes me perch atop my kitchen island and swing my feet while he tells me about his day. A laugh that makes me want to tell him all my secrets and make secrets with him, too. I have decided to love him in the quiet parts for now. I am writing poems I cannot read him yet, humming tunes I want to sing in full voice to him, for him, get the last of my songs for him. It is far too soon to carry this side of the torch into the bramble of the loving forest that is his heart, because I do not know who he'll become to me later, but I cannot stand the thought of putting pressure where diamonds haven't been determined yet. And still I know that he is my favorite new thing about the month of February, more than the chocolate, more than the roses too, but just as much as the peaches from my childhood summers in Atlanta. I write this about 10 days before we are due to see each other in Atlanta. And in the middle of this planning for Atlanta, which was me coming down for a creative work trip, not with my corporate work, I gave this man access to my agenda because it just felt a lot easier than the back and forth of, oh, what days are you free, whatever. I made a shared note. I put my girlfriend Ariana in it because that's whose house I was staying at, and I added him to this collaborative note, noting, pun intended, that it is a love language for me to do a collaborative note with quite literally anybody, right? And so, literally, I shared it at like 1 a.m. He was already asleep on the night that I shared it. By the time I wake up at 7 a.m., there are plans in that damn agenda. Almost every other day that was available for the two of us to get together, that man had a plan in there. And even went so far as to make plans for myself and my girlfriend, whose house I was staying at, who also works with me in my corporate work, who is also my creative partner, and who is going on a retreat with me for Black women in business. And so planned and made reservations for us to do a happy hour after that. And it was really just such a thoughtful and like sweet thing to do. To have somebody do the work of caring to plan for you was really something I had only experienced lightly, never as in depth as the experience that I had with him in that moment. And I was so excited that I started to feel just like really deeply emotional. And so all these things are kind of like coming forth, right? There's this need to write about him. There's this need to write about what I'm feeling by being in proximity to him. And it's not entirely about him, it's about me too, and who I think I'm becoming in the time that he caught me in. And do you guys remember, I think I mentioned this in maybe episode 11, that I feel like I meet men in the flash. There is this thing that's happening in my universe, and I just happen to meet somebody in that space, in the flash, when the thing is happening, whatever the thing might be. It's sometimes in my career, it's sometimes in my personal success, it's right when I'm getting ready to go do something amazing, or right when shit's starting to get weird. You know what I mean? I feel like I've always met men in the flash, and then here I was, again, meeting this man while planning for the flash. The flash was in Atlanta. The flash was something I'd been prepping and spending the last month for and working toward and making determinations about and investing thousands of dollars into. And there were all of these things that were kind of ongoing, and they were because I didn't meet him in my flash. I met him and then flashed. And that's so crazy. I don't have this. I want to, like, that's so crazy that this is the first time that I'm actually, like, really putting this together. Is that the flash with B happened in post. And I think that that's a really cool thing to note. So, you know, I've written this journal entry. I'm feeling all the feelings. I'm really excited to see him. We're going to spend some time together. This is great. But I'm getting ready to drive to Atlanta, and there are two questions that are really just like, am I going to continue to like this man after many more dates? And will he like me? And for whatever reason, there is just so much like agita, right? There is so much heartburn that I'm feeling about this, because time had been spent making commitments to further time together. We'd both done it. We were both in there planning dates. There was a day trip and all sorts of things, like things that existed in this agenda that felt permanent and invested in and involved. And I was like, oh God, I think the worst case scenario here is that we see each other again after a month and find out that that was just a fleeting feeling, that maybe it was just the romance getting the better of us, and that there's nothing more substantive here. And what if he thinks that I'm flighty and irrational and talk too fucking much? Right? And you know what I mean? Or what if he's just not as attractive? There were so many thoughts that I was having, and it's like, but Courtney, that's not in alignment with the time that you've been spending in real space. However, my pattern with love has shown me that the more intimately I care to spend time with someone, the more withdrawn they have become. And so I felt like, when I need to determine that I still feel the way that I've been feeling about him in the lead up to this time spent in Atlanta, but then also asking the question of, will I survive if he doesn't like me as much as I like him or liked him going to the Strip? And so I get to Atlanta, and in the same way that he was the first person that I saw when I touched down in early February, he was the first person that I saw when I touched down this trip to Atlanta. And it felt like coming home. Even though I had all of this like nervousness and fear about what the trip was going to materialize into, and there were all these questions that I was asking myself about what I felt like I was ready to come away from Atlanta with, and what I was okay leaving on the table, and the ways that I thought my life might change. There was so much bigness around it, and it didn't feel heavy, but the nerves were there. I was actually unnerved by how light it felt. In the sense that actually after like we'd spent like the first day together, and I'm sitting there in the aftermath of it, and I'd called my closest girlfriend, and I'm literally shaking, and I can't stop shaking. There is a shiver all over me, because I recognize that I am done. I am out of the game. And for 2.5 years, this content that I'd been making, the The space that I'd occupied, the close friends journey that this started out as, all of these things with which I've really come to strongly, one, love, and then two, identify with, had shifted overnight. And not so much overnight, but it felt that way, right? And so there are all these nerves that I have, and I'm like, oh my God. And the way that like things kind of like manifest for me is when I'm starting to feel really undone, there is usually one very specific thing that undoes the doing of the undoneness, you know? And I was very clear, I think, suddenly on like what that was. I was like, you know what, y'all, I love you. All the girls wanted all the tea. Like, hey, you know, how are you feeling? What, you know what I mean? Where are you at with things? And I was like, I just kind of need to like be quiet for a little bit. I put my phone on D&D and I made a decision. Deleted Hinge same day. Took me off the market so that I can sit in what that is. Any other dates? Like there were like 2 conversations ongoing. I don't owe an explanation for where I went or why I left and whatever. I felt so strongly about what was happening there, and not just because of our time together, but because the entire month leading up to that had been full of such certainty. And the way that I stopped shaking the moment I did the things that I needed to do to button things up on my end, I was like, okay, cool. And it was so telling for me that clarity came on the other side of elimination. Clarity came at me in a way that I had not ever seen in myself before. And the nerves I now know were about getting grounded. I know that now. And so it's very interesting, I think, to kind of like look back on this. And I know that this is already a really long podcast episode, guys. So I'm going to try to like keep the rest of this, so the rest of like this middle piece of the story quite brief, because there's so much more to dig into here. But that was quite foundational. And then another piece of that was also incredibly foundational was the stay trip. So we hadn't talked about this here on the pod, but baby girl in her very real life has adopted something of an era known as a critter era. Now, bear with me, y'all, before I lose you, okay? I have been feeling very squirrely, like very just like energetically quite scoundrel-like, energetically quite undone, a little unmoored, a little untethered, and not always in a bad way, but in a very like sort of pew pew pew, you know what I mean? Like just there is a running around of it all, and there's something I think that also has felt very primal about the way that I've been able to give such immediate language to the discomfort of how rapidly these changes are occurring in my life, right? And so, I was like, oh, like, man, I was on live one night, and I was just like, y'all, I just want to be like a damn otter. I just want to be an otter. I think that I am just a little otter girl who wants to just laze in the river of life with my little otter family. We'll hold hands. You know, they call that a raft. When there are multiple otters and they're holding hands and they're floating in the river or in the ocean, right? It's called a raft or a bevy or a couch, right? And so I was like, I just want to like be an otter in the raft of the river who's, you know what I mean, just cracking sea urchins on the tummy, and you know what I mean, and has a favorite rock. That is what I want to be doing. I would like for things to be so easeful, in contrast to this sort of squirrely weaseliness with which I'm moving through my life right now, which is feeling kind of uncomfortable. And I know it's uncomfortable because my life needs to change, but I've identified that I really just want to be an otter. Now, the reason why I love otters, I've loved them for years. Otters have been my favorite animal since I was like 13. Like the moment I started learning about otters, I was like, yeah, that's me as a person. I'm just a little otter girl, right? Putting language to it now sounds funny as hell, but like I truly did feel like there was like a resonation with the way that otters play, with the way that they take care of themselves and others, in the way that they build community, and river otters specifically, right? But like, you know. And I also just thought that they were so cute. I think they're so fascinating. I could spend hours online looking at animal facts in general. But otters have held true in that way. And I'd kind of forgotten how much I loved them. until this year kind of brought me back to that. And I even feel like I'm like a little like walking around version of like the little otter emoji. That's just me, like, right? I'm a little otter girl. I know y'all did not expect to hear 5 minutes of me talking about otters, but I love them. And I'd mentioned it, I think, once or twice to be in conversation, um, about just like favorite animals or something. And I'd asked him, like, what's your favorite animal? And he told me his. And then I told him mine. I'm like, I just really love otters. And I started telling him otter facts and whatever. And he was like, oh, like, that's really cute. I could totally see why you would like them. And I was like, yeah, you know what I mean? It's great. And so a conversation that had kind of started over there with him and then kept going over in my digital spaces was about otters and this desire to just sort of like primally relax at a deep level in the full otter girl experience. I started calling B Big Daddy Otter. Now he didn't know about this for like some time, and I think that this is really funny because on my agenda in Atlanta, like when I shared my agenda with him, I think within a day or two of of him like getting access to that agenda, he already started going in and filling in, like, we're gonna do a dinner here, we'll do this, we'll do that, whatever, like activities and things. But I looked one day and then there was like a day trip with B on the agenda, and then a reservation for like 2:30. And I was like, oh, okay. And I didn't even really think to ask any questions, which y'all know for me is huge because I am a little bit of having answers to my questions makes me feel like I'm in control of what's going on in my universe, and you know what I mean? And I'm really trying to like do a conscious uncoupling from that. And so I was like, oh, look, I see we have a day trip. And he was like, yeah, like, I'll give you more details as we get closer to it, but like, I just, whatever. And so I was like, okay, cool. And the fact that I didn't feel the urge to pry, to ask any further questions, to, you know what I mean, to dig, to try to do some additional research, to even like bother to ask what sort of outfit I should be wearing. I was like, he knows that at some point he's going to have to inform me about what I should be wearing to this thing. I expect that that'll happen before I have to pack to Atlanta, and I don't have to think about it. I just know with how thoughtfully he's already moved through this space that I do not have to worry, right? And so I sort of like released the thought. Now we're in Atlanta now, fast forward. We're in Atlanta. We're having a blast, okay? We've, I think at that point, had been on like 3 or 4 dinners and had met a couple of each other's friends, and you know what I mean, had been perceived quite deeply in the middle of Colony Square. My Atlanta girlies know. And that's the photo that I ended up posting for the soft launch, you know what I mean? And so there was just so much that was going on, and we were really just kind of caught up in that. And so then there is this day where he was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna pick you up from Ariana's at like 10 o'clock. We'll do the things, we'll get on the road, whatever. I was like, okay, cool. I still have no idea where we're going, but he did give me directions about what to wear. He was like, you want to wear a closed-toe shoe and a long pant. And I'm thinking we could be getting ready to do a wine tasting, a distillery. You know what I mean? There are so many places that have directions about what you should be wearing when you go there. So I really just didn't give it too much thought. I'm like, maybe we're taking a cooking class. I don't know, that'd be kind of fun. But where do we day trip to do that? You know, so like I'm thinking through all of those things, but I'm also not obsessed over it. Y'all, we get up to North Georgia and pull up to like this like farm that's like it's like a petting zoo. It's like a drive-through petting zoo. And I was so excited. I was like, B, are you kidding me? Like truly, like almost had tears in my eyes at that point. Because the way that I love an animal, and particularly a fluffy cow. I was like, oh, we're gonna get to pet the fluffy cows. He was like, well, you can do whatever you want, baby girl. I was like, oh my God. I'm so excited. So I'm already like, my inner child is amped up. I'm like, ugh, animals. I'm with this big, burly, beautiful black man. Do you know how happy I am? You have any idea what the numbers that are being done in my heart? I am overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I get to pet a cow, you know what I mean? And also be baby girl. This is phenomenal. I recommend that everybody subscribe to this package, right? Your own packages though, you know what I mean? Not too much anyway. So we're like driving through and I'm figuring like, okay, we gotta go check in somewhere, whatever. So we do that, and then the lady who was ringing us out he was like, oh yeah, like we have a 11 o'clock or a 1 o'clock appointment for the otter experience. And I didn't fully catch it at first, but when she repeated it back, I was like, wait, what? I think my eyes must have gone as big as like saucers. I mean, they must have just like really just opened the fuck up. because I remember like a brief flash. I remember the look on his face, watching my face digest the fact that we were getting ready to see some otters. And watching his face was funny because he both looked concerned that I was getting ready to cry again, and also really overjoyed, like he felt like, yeah, I did the right thing, right? And it was really cool to see. And so I'm sitting there and I'm just like, oh my God, and I'm kind of paralyzed a little bit, and I'm just trying to keep it together, but internally I'm screaming. And I'm screaming for a couple of reasons. One, because nobody has ever cared to like meet me in my interests in that way. They meet me in the interests that are interesting for them, and that's pretty much it. And so I'd sort of come to have this expectation that people only want to do things that are as cool as the thing that they want to do. And so maybe you don't want to go and pet an animal with me, and that's okay, but like that's why I have my systems of activities in place, and I do the things that I enjoy so that I don't go without them and then resent you for it later. You know, it'd be fun to do them with the partner, but maybe that doesn't happen, and it is what it is. And so for him to like meet me in this thing that I had mentioned to him twice at the time of him having access to my agenda, and then continue to mention in much more deep sort of language, both to him and then in my other spaces by calling this man Big Daddy Otter, which really it is the thing that it feels like. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I was kind of freaking out. And so, yeah, so one, if you're in North Georgia, you can go and like spend time and pet otters in their like little pen, and like you get to pose with them, you know what I mean? Little Rainbow and Hannah, and Rainbow knows how to pose, so like you do, it's like you stand there and it's like a little prom date, you know what I mean? Incredibly cute. It was incredibly intimate. It was incredibly thoughtful. It was so many of the things that like I just couldn't, I thought that people were making it up, being seen like that by someone. I thought that people were like, I was like, damn, like that just sounds so good to be true. Like it just almost sounds too good to be true for somebody to like meet you and be so invested in your interests that they would be willing to find things that are not even on your radar to bring you closer to your interests. What? I couldn't have fathomed it, right? And so there were just like, that was an incredible, really foundational experience. We ended up going and having a great day at a brunch like nearby at Wolf Mountain Vineyards in Dahlonega, Georgia, and they have this really beautiful like all you can eat brunch, and you're literally looking out over a mountaintop and drinking champagne. It was absolutely stunning. I mean, truly gorgeous, right? And the fact that this man had just went to the lengths of planning that day, and then we ended up spending more time together, and it was unplanned, and we just kept extending our time together. And ultimately what it ended up what's the word I'm looking for? Culminating in. That's the word. What it ended up culminating in was the desire to continue spending more time together outside of the activities, right? And so as we began spending more time together, spending time with our respective communities separately and then also together, right? We kept finding that we had these really interesting connection points in our communities as well. So one of his coworkers is married to one of my childhood friends. We didn't know that. But then we ended up all going on like a triple date together with another one of his coworkers and her husband, and had a great time. And I was like, wow, okay, like establishing community with you feels easy, right? We've got a mutual love of food. He's becoming a lot more adventurous. Maybe I think he was a more adventurous eater than he gives himself credit for. But even the way that like food has sort of allowed us to learn a lot of things about each other has been so interesting to see. But then ultimately where that sort of landed us was this desire to again spend more time with each other outside of one just expensive ass dates. I love a date. Lord knows I do. But after a while, I'm really just a practical girl. But serial girl, but also practical. You know what I mean? And so it just, at a point, I felt like stopped making sense for us to be spending. Even though primarily it was his resources. And I still didn't feel comfortable doing that over a long period of time. Because, of course, as we're having other conversations, we're starting to be more future forward facing. And as I'm thinking about that, I'm like, I'm not really trying to be in an unbalanced partnership in which you're doing all of these things. And yeah, like we're gonna have to figure out some degree of mutuality. And also, I'm kind of getting tired. Like I'm getting a little overwhelmed by the fact that there's always an activity, but I want to spend time with you. What does that look like? Well, we got an Airbnb and shacked up for 12 days. Yep, sure did. And in that space of time, learned so much. I kept waiting to dislike him at some point. Not because I wanted to, but because the last time I spent any amount of time, like it's such a close amount of time in shared space with someone was during the pandemic, and it was a woeful and dreadful experience. I mean, man, right? And so as I'm sort of looking back at the really wonderful 12 days that we were able to spend together before I went back to Charlotte, and and before life started lifing again the way that it did, it was so incredible to find that I never tired of him, even in the mundane. In fact, because of the mundane, I think I was really able to easily rest in my love for him. And the same thing is true vice versa. And so it was so much fun just getting to share that space. And not just playing house, like really not just playing house, but really having conversations about the building of a future and desires that we have for ourselves, and establishing routines and spending time apart. And he would go into his office and I would work from a coffee shop nearby, and we'd both find a coffee shop and work from there together, and we'd go get breakfast and then we'd both go into his office. And there really felt like there was a merging of the life. And the ability to merge that life, and the ease with which, and the communication with which we were able to merge our lives in a way that felt really seamless, while also encouraging each other to kind of continue to engage with our communities independently, was a really beautiful thing, and speaks back to that piece of love not being a shackle, but as an avenue to freedom. It became so incredibly abundant to me that that was even an option because of that time that we were able to spend together. And so now, being back in Charlotte, it's kind of crazy because I really don't feel like we're long distance. It doesn't feel that way. Like, yes, he's in Atlanta. He's no longer in New York. And we're going to figure out all of those other pieces. But I think the thing that I am feeling now feels like a safety and security in knowing that there is a mutual willingness to bridge the gap of space. It's not just mine and it's not just his. This is somebody who wants to share deep space with me, is willing to invest in sharing deep space with me, is willing to, and is excited about being around. And as much as it is great that I can have fun with this man, my preference is to do the mundane with him. And we'll find the fun in it. So that's really the tea. You know what I mean? That's the full, that's like, I feel like that's me bringing y'all like so fully into the experience without really telling y'all too much more of my business. You know what I mean? Because I love you, my babies. But you know what I mean? At some point, we'll talk about this in just a second, actually. But here's the thing about this type of earliness. For as early as things feel, as early as things are with B, it doesn't feel new. And so I think the reason why it doesn't feel new is because while we are in the midst of all of these interesting changes, and it requires so much damn thought, and I'm saying that not even begrudgingly, it just requires a lot of thinking. The logistics that are required, the alignment of scheduling, the thinking about the future, the checking in to make sure or not to make sure, but the checking in to get feedback on the things that we think and envision for ourselves. Finally, having a thinking partner is crazy. And so while we've been doing all of this checking in with both ourselves and each other and our communities, and re-engaging with our communities, and doing some family introductions, which has been wonderful, and having all of these conversations about the future, we're making a point to be as gentle with each other as we can be, while we're also doing the thinking and feeling the feelings. And that makes me feel infinitely more safe. Oh man, I just feel like I need, you know what I mean? My drink is like half ice, you know? I'm gonna get a little bite of candied ginger here, just a little nom. kind of unpleasant without the sugar in it. Never mind. I'm gonna rest that there. Mm-hmm. Ooh, she's so strong though. You know I like that. You know I like that. So even in the early stages of this relationship, and I do recognize that it is early, it has been an incredibly contemplative, thoughtful, and revealing space to be in. And there are a lot of things that I feel like I've been learning so far. I mean, the lessons I feel like are truly countless. But in order to keep in alignment with the numbering, convention that I've been doing for the rest of the episode, I'll give you the 8. So here are the 8 things that I think I'm learning so far as a result of this relationship and its entree into my life. 1, safety. Emotional, spiritual, physical, and financial safety brings forward things in the most chaotic sort of way. Okay? I can't begin to tell you the unearthing and unraveling of things that have been happening in my universe at the same time that this relationship has swung into full bloom. And there were things that, quite frankly, needed an unraveling, needed a relook, needed a reinspection. And so the unraveling of them, but the safety to land the feelings and the thoughts in a soft sort of place, I'm so grateful for. Not just because of the emotional piece, but because it is really fun to have somebody to strategize with around what will happen next, right? And while he is not entirely he's not responsible really for any of these things. I am responsible for all of them. But the softness of this landing place has allowed for me to not have to worry about my emotional needs being met by a romantic partner, while I am also trying to navigate through things that might require my attention, but at different times and at different intervals and at different speeds. You know what I mean? I can't speak today. But 2, security and sexiness can exist in the same place at the same time. Point blank, period. I wasn't even sure that that could be true, and I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. 3, running to someone is not enough. You have to be sure you're not running from something. One of the biggest questions, actually, that I was asking myself in the days leading up to this Atlanta trip was if I felt like the potential of exclusivity, even something as mild as exclusivity, was looming over my head in such a threatening sort of way, because I felt like I could be losing out on the dating experience that has largely defined this community and my relationship to it over the last 2.5 years. Now, as a reminder, this with love and butter thing, you know what I mean? We go together real bad. But it started out as a close friends journey. The first year was just me and the lascivious little details as I scoundreled my way through the dating streets of New York. And it was fun and it was lively and it was interesting and there was always an update. And then as we moved into 2022, things became a lot more like situationships. And I worried that I was losing myself in the desire to just be loved because of those situationships, and that the rigmarole of the previous year had worn me out or jaded me so much that I was just willing to take any sort of opportunity to be partnered with a more serious man. Well, I ended up being wrong on just about every account, and thank my lucky stars that I was, because then going into 2023, all I wanted for myself was the opportunity to date again the way that I loved so much for myself in 2021. I felt like I was having my most fun at that time. I felt my most beautiful, my most thoughtful, my most sensual. I felt my most brilliant. I also felt my most hopeful at that time. I imagine because of how little I actually knew. And so in 2023, all I desired to do this year was date and bring her, that fun, playful girl, back to me. I just wanted to return to the fun and playful and beautiful and sensual and brilliant Courtney. The one who existed before she started getting hung up on the words of men who never had any intention of action. And if I'm being honest, I'm not even entirely sure what it was that they were really offering me outside of the ego stroke of being wanted. Oh, to be thirsted over, but to rarely be fed. The difference between 2021 and 2022 partly felt so impacted by my decision to move to Charlotte in early 2022. The newness made me feel enabled to explore spaces that I usually wouldn't have, things that I knew would not bear fruit or even vegetables. I think that the openness of living in a new space and the endlessness of possibility might have blurred my clarity for a while. And so, for a while there, a whole year in fact, I lost my dating way. So to be 2 months into 2023 and be falling for someone at a time where I thought I was going to be in full swing with courting Courtney was slightly scary because of how sobering it actually was. I worried going into the Atlanta trip when I shared my agenda with this man and noticed that slowly but surely he was taking up almost every other day of my trip. So any time that wasn't with my girlfriends could have been with him, even though he graciously left some space in there and made a point to be intentional about doing so, and I certainly wasn't mad about that. But I did start privately asking myself the question of, well, what if I meet somebody else and I decide that I want to go out with them? Would I feel like I was cheating? What if I wanted to go on a date? And the more time I spent with him, I found that I couldn't even imagine spending any amount of time with any man that I wasn't already platonically connected to. This flirting persona that I'd built and prided myself on for years found intense focus instead in the safety of him. And in it, a friendship began to bloom too. And I wasn't running from singleness by choosing to love him. I was easing into it like a hot bubble bath, and still am. 4. My inner child was right underneath the surface the whole time. Something that became pretty clear to me as I was writing out my value set for my relationship prior to even meeting my partner was the need for play. I'm not by nature a person who plays a lot in the physical sense, but I am an incredibly playful and light person. And I think in part because of having been raised as an only child by divorced parents, there were just not a bunch of other children around for me to engage and play with. And so my imagination was my sense of play, and it's hard to do that when you're not in community. And so to discover that my inner child was bubbling right up underneath the surface, everybody used to call me Coco when I was younger. My girl Coco was right under there the entire time, waiting to be talked to and laughed with, and to have pillow forts made in the middle of a South Atlanta Airbnb living room. It was craziest to me, I think, when my mom actually noticed that when I would send her pictures of me and Bea together, that I'd started smiling with my tongue pressed between my teeth again, the way that I used to before I turned 8 years old, when I guess I figured out how the world worked. 5. Not everyone is going to be able to hold happy, joyous, supporting, or understanding space for the new things that bring you happiness, joy, support, and understanding. This piece is, of course, going to be harder to navigate because the circumstances have changed under which people might have the bandwidth to love you and to love what you love. I do understand that it's completely normal to feel betrayed, slighted, and maybe even uncared for. I also think that during this time, it is incredibly important for me to not be betraying myself. I continue to trust my intuition as it pertains to what to share. Even some things that might be for the public cannot be for others in private. What an interesting little reversal, right? They can love you in their own way, but maybe it's from the bleachers. And that's okay too. 6. Reciprocity is a choice, and it must be made nearly daily. I can't even begin to tell you the ways that being thoughtful and introspective and operating from a place where the desire is one of reciprocity and mutual commitment and a sharing of partnership have made me so incredibly protective of this space, but also infinitely more thoughtful in other spaces. I feel like I've become more aware of some blind spots than ever before because of the desire for mutuality. And I really thought that y'all were lying, for real, when y'all said that your partner makes you want to be better. I thought it was cap. I actually do get it now. And I think that it is because of the choice of mutuality and reciprocity that you can find betterment in a romantic relationship. 7. Eventually, the pedestal must be shattered so that you can be seen eye to eye. Y'all might have heard me talk about the pedestal before. I can't even begin to get into all of that right now, but it is surprising to me now, every day, the ways that I am allowing myself to be seen without as much questioning, as in not interrogating his ability to see me because I know he does. And he is incredibly intentional about letting it be known that he does. And so sometimes to not even ask any questions at all feels like such a gigantic transition for me, who's had a question for people who did not ever have answers to produce. For years, I think I've struggled with the reconciling of me as Courtney up against the visage of me as Courtnee Futch. We are the same person, bound by the same moral compass, the same tenets, the same heart, and the same mind, but we are not always treated the same way. And social media has forced me to be more cognizant about how my publicly facing image matches up to me authentically. Being aware about the difference between the two, or at least the perceived difference, has allowed me to go into this relationship without the expectation of performance from myself. And in turn, B, my partner, has been able to hold space for me to not bring a performance of myself to the table. One of the earlier things that I shared with him was that my biggest fear in a relationship was being placed on a pedestal. For fear that when, not if, but when, my dysfunction, however large or small, surfaced in whatever ways, it would be disenchanting and disillusioning and maybe even disgusting. The work that I have done to be aware of this fear has given me the space to just be me, and that means whichever me I need to be on that day in order to survive. To be loved with respect to who can show up that day has been incredibly eye-opening. 8. I need more time. I need more time. I need more time. The amount of time required to come down from the height of this experience, 2 weeks imposed, does not feel like enough. 2 days was certainly not enough. 2 months might not ever even feel like enough. And currently, I am passing through more challenging feelings that have come up because of the safety of the relationship and all of the excitement about the relationship, all of the friends who want to catch up to hear about what's going on and how this relationship even came to be has created an absolute lack of silence in my life. The excitement has created a lack of silence in my life. I want to be clear here that I'm not complaining, but I am identifying something that I think is really important because, in fact, the most notable thing that has come up in the last month has been the lack of silence in my life. Atlanta was so wonderful in so many ways, but also was jam-packed with so many experiences, so many people, so many tasks on my to-do list, and ultimately the challenge that I had was finding the space to sit still and think, and then find the language, and then write it down. And in a sense, I felt quite verbally constipated. And I know it's not a sexy term, but it's really all I have today. Do you know what I mean? And it's all I have to describe the sort of backing up of words that I have been feeling, especially when I consider how much feeling I have been doing. It has actually underscored my sensitivity in a way that I could never have expected. And the thing that is coming up for me now and in a moment of clarity is this. My partner is not in opposition to my need for silence in order to find the words. I am coming back to the words because I found the space with him to feel the feelings, and feeling has helped me make way back to the silent spaces. As somebody who talks for a living, the need for silence has become so incredibly underscored over, I think, even the last 6 months, that to operate in constant absence from that, because so many conversations need to be had, so much joy needs to be shared, so many lives need to be talked through, so many connections need to be reestablished, so much community needs to be built, that I was suffering from a lack of silence. And it was never about him. It was never about him. There was a kindness with which the first time I identified that the words weren't coming to me, because he knows how important my words are to me, the first time that I started to get like truly emotional, I was like, I don't know how to explain it, but my words aren't coming. And I was nearly in a panic, right? But I'm trying not to make this his problem because it's not his problem. And I don't even know that it's mine. But to be without my words, the thing that like has moved me through the last 2.5 years and maybe the last decade and maybe my whole life, to be without them was really alarming and very scary. And he held space for me and encouraged me to do whatever it was I needed to do in order to get back to the words. And I had to figure out that the silence is where my words thrive. I am infinitely grateful for a love that gives me the things that I need so that I can show up in the rest of the world the way that the world needs me to. Shout outs to B. You know what I mean? And also, you know what, damn it, shout out to me. All right, y'all. So we're nearing the end of the episode. Do you know what I mean? I'm really proud of us. I've been sitting here and talking for the last 2 hours. I hope that you're still here. I hope that you're still here, babe. But if not, you had to take a little breaky break. I understand. I hope you'll be back. Let's go ahead and move into the spread, right? So we can go ahead and like round this bad boy out. I feel like this has been a really robust little episode. Which also reminds me, if you haven't already, put this on pause, go boop, and then open up another little tab, a little tabula, okay, a little Tabitha Brown. Go ahead and open that up. And you're just going to type in Courtnee Futch .substack.com. CourtneeFutch.substack.com. That's where my newsletter lives, okay? Because this is the perfect time for me to announce to y'all the newest series coming to the With Love and Butter Newsy, which is called My Butter Half. I can't even say it without laughing. Okay, My Butter Half, Cooking for Two. You'll find a bunch of recipes there that are helping me re-engage with my love for cooking, but in partnership. This recipe is fairly involved. So it's a crab and roasted corn carbonara with toasted brown butter lime breadcrumbs. Sounds like a lot, but it is delicious. It's creamy, it's bright, it's a little smoky from the charred corn, and it's finished with like a really lovely little bit of crunch from the toasted panko breadcrumbs. I truly don't even have any words to describe it. It's like transcendent. And I can't believe now that I'm in love with the pasta person. Y'all know I don't be eating pasta. Y'all know I don't be eating pasta. I'm not a pasta girl. I'm a potato girl, but it's okay. Things we do for love. So, you know what I mean? Go ahead, look for that recipe over on the Newsy. Go ahead and give it a little look-see. So you'll find that over there. All of the recipes for all of the episodes will be available on the newsletter. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. You know, them living on CourtneeFutch.com wasn't really making a whole lot of sense logistically, but putting them into the newsletter does. So if you haven't already, please go over and subscribe. It's either free to subscribe or $8 a month. I'd really appreciate it. You know, if y'all, you know, if you want to keep in the loop and you want to get access to some exclusive recipes and exclusive thoughts and get these podcast episodes when they come back earlier than everybody else, you want to get first drop. There are some really cool things that are going on in the next couple of months. So consider subscribing. I would very much appreciate that. You know what I mean? Baby girl's building a profitable personal brand. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? All right. So now let's go ahead and move on over to All is Paired in Love and Forks, because all things are paired in love and forks. There is, of course, a wine pairing for this crab carbonara, okay? This crab and roasted corn carbonara. It's carby, okay? And so that is going to be a really beautiful citrusy Sicilian white wine called Etna Bianco, okay? And it's absolutely gorgeous. It's got like ripe fruit kind of like in the aromatics and on the nose, but it's almost got a little bit of a salty finish on the palate. It offers a little bit of a touch of like lemon zest, a little bit of Asian pear, and some almonds, which I think play really beautifully up against the brown butter and the lime toasted breadcrumbs. So I'm very excited about it. And I hope that you enjoy it, try something new, kind of get into a new varietal of wine, and let me know what you think. And of course, I wouldn't be me if there wasn't a song pairing to support this food and beverage collab. But the song pairing here is Blue Moon, B-L-U, Moon, by They, T-H-E-Y, period. And I'm such a huge fan of this song for a couple of reasons, but from a nostalgic standpoint, there was like a little montage video that I had made for B just a couple of weeks into dating. We were actually not even 8 days in. It was like right up on Valentine's Day, and that was my little Valentine to him. And I soundtracked this song over that little cinematic, little 30-second moment. And it just made me really happy to do. And every time now when I hear that song, I think about him and the excitement and the newness of making the choice to put yourself out there. And so I'm a really huge fan of it. I hope that you all go check it out. It's a good vibe. And I think that you'll understand why I loved it so much. All right, y'all. So now let's go ahead and round this thing out. Let's get into just the tip, okay? It is very obvious to me that some stuff is being unearthed in me as a result of this new relationship. The thing that I am finding is that the questions have shifted from being mostly external about the person to internal about my relationships to external spaces. And that shift feels kind of insane, right? The questions are not about B. The questions are being answered alongside B in a way that feels so deeply personal and internal and introspective for myself. And it really has been such a mind blowing sort of experience. So here are the three things that I'm trying to figure out next, right? I've been giving you lists of 8s and 16s this whole time. But baby, for this one, you know what I mean? I want to try to keep things brief. There are three things that I'll be trying to figure out next. One, what does creation look like when protecting my new partnership with a healthy degree of privacy feels like the way forward? I'm not sure yet what my relationship to the content is going to look like yet. I do think that the dating stories will likely change. One, because there is no further continuation of a dating story. But two, because I want to be mindful about how I am now retelling these dating stories, right? The level of romance or lascivious detail or, recounting, I feel like does need to change in a way that feels appropriate and respectful of the space that I am in, right? But the lessons remain true either way. And I imagine that the lesson sharing, the lesson learning, all of those things will likely stay quite similar, right? When I'm putting more emphasis on what I've taken away from it and a lot less on the storytelling piece around how that interaction happened or what sort of headspace I was in at that time, I think that it'll make it a little bit easier of a transition, but I'm going to give myself some grace to figure that out. Because I am someone who also really appreciates when folks are transparent, not just in their singlehood, when there's ultimate reliance upon the community to help them get through their singlehood, right? And that's such a strong thing, but also when in relationships. And so the next few months are going to be me figuring out exactly what it looks like to be sharing the feelings that are coming up on my end, while also keeping B and I at a healthy distance from the internet. I do wish that more people talked about the earlier stages of a relationship, though, because the crippling fear that I thought that I might get this wrong or that I am in fact unlovable were these niggling little feelings that kept coming up, especially as we got closer to a mutual commitment. And in the aftermath of the commitments were all of these feelings, things that hadn't come up for me in years, the sorts of things my therapist said we moved on from. Things that I am absolutely positive are just some form of nasty self-sabotage attempting to rear its very ugly head, and I am doing my level best not to let those things win. But I do wish to be in conversation around those things, right? The early stages of being in a relationship. I think we hear from people when they've gotten, through their first couple of years, but even those first couple of months, what does that look like? And I think I do intend to process in post what some of these things are looking like, but I don't feel like the internet is the place that I'm going to run to when we are in the middle of those things. And I think that my only request from this space and from this audience is to hold or give some grace to me and hold some space for me if there is not an immediacy of content delivery, because I am living life. 2, in a relationship, how am I not losing myself? That's something that I'm really excited to kind of get into and dig into the idea of that a little bit more intentionally than I had in previous relationships. Because one thing I know about me is I'm a my man type of girl. And I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't always been like that. And that's because those men weren't that man. And they just weren't. But I really do value, I think, and appreciate the safety and comfort and joy and resting place of a healthy romantic dynamic. However far removed from that I might have been in the past is no longer of relevance. However, and I feel like this is very important to say, I am always going to be a girl's girl. My understanding of this entire thing, right, is that while we might be in a postseason break from the podcast, we have gone through the trenches together, quite literally. You've been with me, checking in episodically in the lives, frequently, right? Reading the writings and sharing your experiences, and some of you as early back as the close friends in 2021. Some of you as early as 2021 have been deeply involved in the emotional development and process that has been able to allow me to go from a woefully single and heartbroken girl to someone who can now envision a full life with someone. That is crazy, right? And while I don't feel like I owe anyone really, further time in those trenches, in the treachery of the trenches, I do feel like I continue to owe my community, this community, an honest, loving, and deeply engaging experience. So I will be putting significantly more emphasis on connecting in real life because the community has to move so that it can grow. Because I want to see your faces and get the opportunity to love on you out loud the way that you've loved on me out loud and online. 3, I've decided that I'm going to let it be okay that I am maybe less active with this podcast when it resumes in July. I am building a life. And it sounds so crazy to say that, but I am building a life and it is a good one. I don't know what's going to happen next, my love. I swear I don't. I know that if I can help it, things look very different by July. And if they don't look different by this July, then they look incredibly different by next July. And I want to give myself the space to breathe and settle in it. And also the understanding now that I have that I need time to think. And that doesn't mean that anything is wrong. In fact, it means so many things are going right at the same time, and I just need time to parse through it. I told myself that I was going to take this break. I've said it over and over again on this podcast, that there would be a hiatus so that I can go and live life. In the meantime, I won't be putting pressure on myself to show up in spaces where my thinking isn't done yet. We all deserve the completion of thought. And I don't think that my thinking is done about this yet. I think that the way that this love makes me feel is going to inspire my first book on love. I think that it is going to inspire my creativity. I think it is going to inspire the next generation of lover girls. If for nothing else than the fact that y'all have already begun to tell me how it's inspired you. I am so infinitely grateful for the time that we have spent together. This is not the last episode of With Love and Butter, but there is a pause. There is a pause so I can go live life, so that I can do the hard work of thinking and feeling and loving and letting myself be loved. And I hope that love finds its way to you. I truly hope so. You're so deserving. You're so deserving. Oh, brother. Oh, God. Okay. You know what I mean? I really held onto these lashes for like the full 2.5 hours. That's so crazy. Oh, you know what I mean? I promised to like not make us all cry so frequently in the newsletter where you'll be going to subscribe, right? Because you follow directions and you're a good girl and I love that, right? So in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to the With Love and Butter newsletter for weekly writing and for poetry and for recipes and for other ephemera. I'll be coming at y'all in real life with a series of community and cocktail-based events all throughout the summer. And I'll meet y'all back here at the end of the summer, I promise. I can't wait to see how our lives change for the